Welcome to this special election broadcast from the Property Investors Party. What we're going to cover in this video is who property investors should vote for in the UK general election of December 2019. Do you vote for this guy, Jeremy Corbyn, or do you vote for this guy, Boris Johnson? They both have massive flaws, and let's face it, it's difficult to be enthusiastic of about any one of them in terms of personalities and the like, but actually in terms of property investors and doing property investing, the choice is pretty clear cut, and I'm going to explain exactly why. My name is Ranjan Bhattacharya. I've been investing in property for 30 years. If you're new to this channel, you're going to find new videos on here every week, and they're all focused around helping you be a more successful property entrepreneur. So if you haven't already done so, smash the like button, subscribe and hit that bell icon, and we'll let you know as soon as we upload. Go on, I'm waiting. Have you subscribed and hit that bell icon? Do that, because we release plenty of new content each and every week. Anyway, on with this video. Who should property investors and developers vote for in this election? It seems it's a really hard choice, actually, because there isn't a party out there that is friendly to landlords and property investors and property developers. Everyone seems to be hating on the private rented sector. In fact, the term landlord now doesn't exist. It seems that landlord has been replaced with the term rogue landlord by our political masters, and that's very unsettling indeed. I've got a video on this. It's had 65,000 views to date, actually, on why the political climate has got so unfriendly for us in the private rented sector. You can have a view of that. Click on that button on the top there. But watch this video first. Make sure you do that. Now, on the face of it, property people, business people, entrepreneurs have pretty much voted Conservative. They've voted blue. But for us property people, it's very easy to look upon the last few years as the Blue Party, the Tory Party, have really turned against us and haven't had our best interests at heart. Just look at what they've done. In 2015, we had Section 24, the tax on mortgage interest payments. But you know, after a little while, we kind of figured out some solutions to that, and that problem, if you like, has been solved. I got some video, I'll put it in the corner there if you want to find out about the Section 24 problem and how it's been solved. 3% surcharge on investment property purchases. Now, that's been a right old killer, particularly if you're doing buy-to-let in the southeast of England. There's some ways around that to mitigate against that 3% surcharge. I've got a video on this in the corner. I'll put that up there for you to have a look at as well. And also, there's been a torrent of extra regulation. Some of it has been necessary, but some of it has been a little bit overkill and is already affecting investment in the buy-to-let sector. And this is particularly affecting the HMO marketplace and shared housing. And I've got some videos on that as well, and how people have mitigated against that risk. So it's been a very interesting Tory party, if you like, assault on everyone that's doing renting in the UK. But on the other hand, they've done some good things. What they've done with permitted development rights has been absolutely amazing. They've recognised that many commercial buildings are no longer fit for purpose, and they're allowing developers to quickly circumvent the usually slow planning system and repurpose these buildings to alternative uses as simply as possible. And again, I've got a video on that very subject in the corner here. And of course, for property developers, the Help to Buy scheme has been absolutely fantastic. So if you build or convert a building and create new apartments, this allows you to participate in the government's Help to Buy scheme so that you can sell your units on to first-time buyers, so that they only need 5% deposit. This has been fantastic for anyone doing property development projects. So there has been some good. But if we look at the other side, the Corbynites, if you like, and what Labour are proposing, well, you know, it's who's going to be left to turn the lights out, if you like, in terms of the entrepreneur community. The Labour Party seems to have declared all-out war on buy-to-let landlords and also anyone in the property profession. Let's just have a look at some of the things that have been said recently. For example, one of the initiatives is to introduce a right to buy. This is tenants having a right to buy their tenanted properties off their landlords at discounted rates. So basically, who pays for that? Does that come out of the landlord's pocket? What happens if these properties have mortgages on them? Who's going to take that haircut? Are the banks going to take that loss? I mean, it's fraught with so many difficulties and issues and fairness issues as well. It's very, very difficult to see how that would work, and it would affect landlords in a very, very bad way. Land value tax, LVT, has been muted. At the moment, if you do something with property, you pay tax on the income you generate from it. That's very, very important. Land value tax is about saying you just pay a tax just for the very benefit, if you like, of owning a piece of land, whether or not that land is producing an income. This will obviously affect buy-to-let in higher value areas where the rental yields are relatively low. It'll then be a situation where for many investors it is simply not worth owning a property apart from their own home, and then who is going to supply badly needed private rented housing in those high value areas. The other area they're talking about bringing in is a planning gain tax. Now, this is a tax where if you get planning permission to build houses on a site or convert a building into something, and the value of that land or building increases as a result of obtaining that planning permission, then what Labour want to do is impose a tax at that point. Now, this will obviously affect the viability of doing many build projects altogether. And it's also a timing and cash flow issue, because it's when the event of getting planning permission on a site doesn't actually generate the entrepreneur any money. If I get planning permission to build 5 houses on a site, all that is a piece of paper. But getting that permission will trigger a tax on that planning gain. But I've got no income coming in at that point on which to pay the tax. The income only actually comes in when those units are sold, which can be 2 or 3 years later. So it creates a massive, massive problem of how many of these schemes and what the incentive is to take the risk. And that's a very important point, because when you're developing multiple houses on a plot, if the Labour Party and the government want to suck out a significant amount of tax as soon as you've got planning permission, then when you've got planning permission, that's when the game starts. You've got to then build out those units. And there's so many risks and entrepreneurial risks that you take in building out a scheme. You know, your builders can go bust, cost of materials can go up or down, labour rates can change. There's so many risks, and project management may go well or may not go well. There's so many risks that that a developer is exposed to between getting planning permission and building out the site. If the government has taken a tax before they've started the project, then that really spoils a lot of the incentive, if you like, for actually doing the development in the first place. And if the private sector aren't incentivized to develop properties, then how is the housing crisis going to be solved? Unless people do have an incentive for putting their own house on the line to take entrepreneurial risk, to actually build new dwellings to solve this housing crisis. Labour have made no secret about their intention to bring in rent controls. Now, on the face of it, it might sound like a great idea, but the thing is, what that would mean is that all property for rent will be at the lowest common denominator. I mean, let me give you another example. For example, if we had controls on the pricing of airline tickets, then everyone would do Ryanair. There would be no incentive to provide a first class service or a business class service, because what's the point? If all the airfares are capped, then everyone will go down to Ryanair. If price of shoes is capped, then why would Nike bother? Everyone might as well produce the stuff that you get in Primark. So The same thing would happen in property. It would just diminish choice. It would eradicate the incentive for providing higher quality property, and people that are looking for premium property, perhaps in premium locations or with premium fit out, are robbed of the choice, if you like, to choose and pay for that premium dwelling. So rent controls might sound great, but it will de-incentivize landlords to actually provide the stock if they're not making a profit on it. And it will also limit choice for people who want to choose something which is a little bit more than just the basic rental offering. I mean, to sum up, it's pretty clear cut that if you have followed what the top team are saying in the Labour camp, they have a clear dislike for all of us in the property profession. I guess the classic example of this was a recent article that came out on John McDonnell's recent speech. It was only about a month ago, but he was talking about how too many properties were rented in his own street where he lives in Hayes in West London. And he was saying that in the street where he lives, he said this in a speech, in the street where he lives, a third of all the properties were rented, and they were overcrowded, and there was damp, and there was maintenance issues, and there were greedy landlords and all this sort of stuff. So what the newspaper went along and did is they went down his street and they knocked on every single door in John McDonnell's street, and they found that only one property in his street was actually rented, and the tenants were actually very happy indeed. So we're dealing with a party who seem to have an ideological hatred to literally make up stuff off the hoof and to justify their position of hatred, if you like, against people in property. Why is that hatred of property? Well, it really goes back to what's been happening in politics, particularly on the Labour side in recent years. In recent years, we have seen the Labour Party under Corbyn shift far more socialist and Marxist and almost communist, if you like, come to think of it. Under Tony Blair and previous leaders, there wasn't really that much between Labour policy and Conservative policy. What we're seeing now is a return to the sort of hardcore socialism that existed in the UK under Labour in the 1970s. And hardcore socialism is against any private ownership. It's against any entrepreneurial success through wealth creation. It's against anyone owning or striving to own a business and take control over their lives in that way. So we're seeing this ideological hatred, if you like, of property ownership, because really property, assets, business under the socialist ideal should be controlled by the state. And that's basically what they're saying, isn't it? Nationalise broadband, nationalise this, businesses are run by workers, all this sort of stuff. We've tried all this before. We've tried all this before in the 1970s. In the 1970s, Britain had a socialist government, which was policies very, very similar, virtually identical to what Corbyn is advocating, and it failed. Here's a fascinating fact for you. Do you know which European country is the only European country to have ever gone bust and had to seek and obtain a bailout from the International Monetary Fund? Well, I'll give you the answer. It was the UK. The UK was the only European country ever to have to go cap in hand to the International Monetary Fund because it had to get a bailout because of bankruptcy. And this was because of the last time we tried these socialist policies under Labour in the 1970s. It was the state should own everything. So the state nationalised. Britain had a fantastic car industry in the 50s and 60s with all sorts of marques and brands doing very, very well worldwide. Of course, Labour didn't like that. They decided to nationalise it all and take all car production into state ownership, created British Leyland, which created rust buckets which no one wanted to buy and no one wanted to run, and half the time they were on strike all the time. The state took over airlines. They took over any business, basically. You know, the state under Labour in the 1970s even nationalised a chain of betting shops. What the hell is the state doing owning a chain of betting shops? Does that actually make sense? And Dennis Healy's famous speech about taxing the rich until the pips squeak. Well, what happened in the 1970s was that anyone that had made it left the country. We had a massive exodus of people, of talent from the UK in the 1970s. And this was very evident in the entertainment and media industry at the time. I mean, I remember seeing an interview with Michael Parkinson. So for younger folks, Michael Parkinson was a chat show host on the BBC during the 70s and 80s. And he famously said in an interview that doing his weekly chat show was really hard in the late 1970s because there was no one to interview. All his guests had left the country. If you look at the stars of the 1970s, whether it's Rod Stewart, David Niven, Queen, people like Roger Moore, they all disappeared out the country. Why? Because Labour had a tax rate of 98%, which meant that there was simply no incentive to do anything, really. So if you're relying on tax from people that don't have an incentive to do anything or leave the country, then you soon run out of money and have to go to the IMF for a bailout, which is exactly what happened. Now, then Margaret Thatcher came in 1979, and there's another folly, really, which a lot of people don't understand. A lot of the left actually derided Margaret Thatcher for her sale of council housing stock in the 1980s. Yes, it was a great thing to do. It turned a lot of tenants into homeowners, and it was the right thing to do at the right time. But a lot of people don't realise it was an absolutely necessary thing to do, because when Margaret Thatcher came in, the country was bankrupt. It had a massive loan to repay with the IMF, and the IMF insisted on all sorts of structural changes and monetary policy tightening in the UK. And the government had all this housing, council housing on its books, which it could not afford to maintain. Margaret Thatcher had to sell off these council houses to generate some income, if you like, to pay back the IMF, who Britain had to go to for a bailout because of these failed socialist policies in the 1970s. What we're seeing for the first time, and we all see this in the world, wherever you are, history repeats itself. As people forget what happened last time, now, of course, there aren't the people who were remember the 1970s are fewer than the people that don't. So when people tout these ideas, these socialist ideas, people don't really look at what happened last time they were touted. And what I see now with a globalized society, it's far easier for people to literally up sticks and go. Okay, basically it boils down to direction of travel of the two main parties. We've got one party, the Labour Party, whose policy seems to be to take the national cake, take bits of cake from people they perceive have got more cake and pass it on to other people who have less cake. Whereas the other side, the Tory party, their direction of travel is what can we do to encourage people so that they grow the national cake. If we grow the national cake and make it bigger, then it's obvious that if the national cake is bigger, then more of it will be taken in tax and more of it can be spent on public services and the like. If the cake is just redistributed, then you take away incentive for people to make any more cake, and the overall cake eventually diminishes. That's basically the direction of travel between the two parties, and that's basically the choice that you have. A lot is said about inequality, but what I say is that what we should strive for, then there's no perfect system because human nature kind of counteracts that. There's never been a perfect socialist government anywhere in the world, and there's never been a perfect capitalist government system anywhere in the world. But the thing is, socialist states have always failed. They've always gone bust, and they've never achieved in any way what they set out to achieve. So who should you vote for then? I mean, you've got Labour on one hand, which is extreme socialism, and you've got Boris on the other hand, who is more entrepreneur friendly, shall we say. Well, let's put it this way. I don't really think Boris is looking out for our interests as property entrepreneurs. I'll tell you what he is interested in. He's interested in leaving a legacy and getting re-elected. He's going down the path of Brexit, right or wrong, he's going down the path of Brexit. And he needs to make Brexit a success. The only way Brexit will be a success if the economy is a success. And the economy will be a success if every entrepreneur and wealth creator gets out there, generates business, generates jobs, and generates tax revenue for the state, basically. So in order to make Brexit a success, in order to leave his legacy, in order to get re-elected, he needs the economy to fly. So he needs to encourage people like us as property entrepreneurs to get out there and do what we do best. So I would be expecting to see in the first budget of a new Johnson government moves on stamp duty to free up sort of housing transactions, if you like, much more rollout of permitted development rights for the repurposing of commercial properties and also residential properties, rolling out of simpler sort of planning systems, reducing the things like corporation tax, allowing businesses to invest more in business and creating the incentive as well. And also, they've already talked about how they're going to increase employers' national insurance, which is a big tax on jobs in the UK. People often deride businesses for doing outsourcing and all the rest of it, without looking at some of the reasons why employment in the UK is so expensive from an employer's point of view. And the moves that they're talking about to allow small businesses to take on a few staff without having to pay the massive employers' NI contributions is going to be a big thing. So that we're going to see lots of moves afoot from a new Johnson government to help entrepreneurs, to incentivize entrepreneurs to get out there and be entrepreneurial, because that's the only way the economy is going to do well. It's the only way Johnson's going to do well. So if you're on the entrepreneurial side of what you like to do, then I don't see any choice really. It's pretty clear cut. You've got to vote. You've got to vote for the boys in blue and girls in blue, of course. Personally, I don't see any alternative. If you're an entrepreneur, if you like doing business, if you want to do property, there's only one choice, and that's to vote for the Tories in this election. Tell me what you guys think. I know I've probably said a whole bunch of controversial stuff and I'm going to get haters and everything, but bring on the hate, comment down below, let's have a discussion. I'm actually going to answer as many points that people come up with in the comments below, so let's have a little bit of fun with it. Whether you agree, disagree, let me know, guys. Let's hope we have sensible government after this election. Bye for now and see you guys in the next video. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you're not a subscriber, what are you waiting for? Subscribe, hit the bell icon. As soon as we upload, we'll let you know. And enjoy these. They're all dedicated to helping you be more successful in property. Happy investing!